Draulio Araújo, the scientific and clinical advisor of BioMind Labs, and Alejandro Antalich, the CEO of BioMind Labs. Please welcome them to the stage. Thanks, gents.
Thank you.
Yeah, please.
Thanks.
Thanks, gentlemen. Enjoy.
Thanks. Thank you, everyone, for being here today and learn a bit more about BioMind Labs. We are a Canadian public company developing the next generation of medicines based on psychedelic molecules. But one of the most important things to highlight is that we are not just another psychedelic company. We are a very young company, but with a very strong background. Here with our neuroscientist, Dr. Draulio Barros de Araújo, what we have as a strong asset is that he was the one in conducting the first randomized placebo-controlled clinical trial on a psychedelic substance for treatment-resistant depression, meaning that we don't base our clinical pipeline on scientific evidence from other sources. We create our own scientific evidence. And one of the things that is also remarkable is that we focus on one psychedelic molecule, which is DMT. And when we say that we need to develop novel drugs to treat different mental health disorders that are affecting probably right now 1 billion people, it's something very serious. And in order to get novel drugs, it's very important to convince the health regulatory authorities that these novel drugs are safe and they have the required efficacy. So in this case, having DMT as our main molecules, we have 50% of the work done because our bodies produces DMT. So right now, in this moment, we have DMT in our brains, meaning that it's safe and our bodies are used to this substance. The other thing, and I believe this is something very important, is that if we have 1 billion people suffering from any kind of mental health disorder, it's very, very important to get affordability on this kind of treatments. So that's why we focus in fast-acting psychedelics. So that's why with DMT, we are getting to this point because we have different psychedelic molecules. For example, in the case of psilocybin, we require 6 hours for a session. In the case of LSD, we require 8 hours. In the case of ayahuasca, from our previous study comes, we require 4 hours. And now with the trials that we have ongoing, we are targeting different routes of administration, but in the case of intramuscular, we are targeting just 1 hour. In the case of our inhaled route of administration, we are targeting just between 10 to 15 minutes. So meaning that we can get these novel drugs to as many patients as we can. And this is something very, very important. On the other hand, we come from the cannabis industry, so we know and we have all the required experience to navigate these troubled waters with controlled substances, and this is very, very important. We know how to deal with regulatory agencies, and the most important thing in this case is that we were the first company in the world to sell cannabis to a federal government. And a few years after, we found the right exit, selling the company to one of the big participants on the cannabis industry, meaning that we know what we are doing, we know very well that we are going to achieve what we have in our milestones. So let me introduce Dr. Draulio Barros de Araújo, who will navigate on all the program that we have developed for BioMind and in order to get these novel drugs as soon as possible to the patients.
Thank you, Alejandro. So, good afternoon, everyone. First of all, thank you all that are still here this late afternoon. So my idea here is to start presenting myself to this new crowd. I've been working with psychedelics since 2006. We started working mainly with a substance that's called ayahuasca, that I believe most of you know. But our first studies with ayahuasca were more interested in understanding the neural basis of ayahuasca. So in order to do so, this is one of our published papers, actually published 10 years ago, in which we were interested in understanding the impact of ayahuasca in the brain, basically understanding where the visions come from. This has given rise to a very interesting hypothesis that we have been working for 10 years, which is the idea that maybe one of the abilities that psychedelics give us is the possibility to see our own thoughts. With this, I'd like to open a disclaimer saying that maybe calling hallucinogenic or hallucination behind the effects of psychedelics is not a precise way of referring to the visual experiences that psychedelics bring up. Let's say that these experiences are closer to a dreamlike state, which is a lot more physiological state that we're used to. The second type of evidence that we have also come from neuroimaging. Here we have a number of brain structures, a number of brain networks. Here, the well-known DeFomo network and the salience network. These two networks seem to play a very important role in the therapeutic effects of psychedelics. When we were starting to work with ayahuasca, these subjects were very experienced individuals in the ayahuasca use, because we needed to have people under the influence of ayahuasca inside an MRI scanner, which is not trivial. For any one of you who had gone into an ayahuasca experience, you would know that this is not trivial. So when we were recruiting individuals from one of the communities that use ayahuasca regularly in Brazil, people would just come spontaneously to us and say, well, I'm here at this community because ayahuasca made me feel better from this condition, say depression, anxiety, the abusive use of certain substances, trauma, and so on. And that's when we decided that it was time to start a series of clinical trials with ayahuasca, so bring ayahuasca into the hospital. Back then, we were working in the university hospital, and so we had a phase 1 clinical trial with ayahuasca, and then with the safety profile that we found in the hospital by using ayahuasca, we started a phase 2A trial with ayahuasca. These are the results of the phase 2A trial with ayahuasca published in 2015. Here we have 17 patients undergoing a single ayahuasca intervention. What you see in the graph on the left is the impact of ayahuasca on depressive symptoms. So ever since then, we have been focusing on treatment-resistant depression, which is a very limiting condition. It's a psychiatric definition, which tells us that these patients do not respond to at least 3 different treatments from different mechanisms of action. So in this trial, we had 17 patients with treatment-resistant depression. And what you see is a very significant impact on the depressive symptoms already happening 1 day after the trial, 1 day after the intervention. With that, we moved on to a phase 2B trial. So this is a randomized placebo-controlled trial, which is still up to today the single and only one clinical trial, phase 2B clinical trial, randomized placebo-controlled trial to test a psychedelic substance in treatment-resistant depression. And what you see here in red is the impact of ayahuasca in these patients, showing a reduce in the symptoms of depression already 1 day after the session. What is the problem with ayahuasca? Well, I wouldn't say the problem, but a limitation of ayahuasca to be introduced in a broader population of patients is something that other speakers have mentioned today, which is the fact that the experience with ayahuasca lasts for a very long time. Well, very long time, I wouldn't say, but 4 hours. And that, of course, it restricts a little bit the availability and the affordability of these treatments. And that's why we moved on to a different formulation of DMT. So as you might know, ayahuasca is a formulation that contains this very powerful psychedelic substance that's called NN-dimethyltryptamine, or NN-DMT. And when you use NN-DMT not together with the other substance that composes ayahuasca, you're able to reduce the effects of these substances to a few minutes. These two initial product candidates that we have, on the left, you have a first product candidate in which we are already using this liquid formulation, inhaled formulation of NN-DMT. We have just started a phase 1 clinical trial. We begun it early April with this inhaled formulation. On the right, you see our second product candidate, which is an intramuscular route of administration of a specific formulation of NN-DMT. These two formulations, for the inhaled formulation, we expect to have an effect on the order of 7 to 15 minutes. On the intramuscular routes of administration, we expect to have that effect for about 1 hour. But why DMT? Why did we choose DMT as our first molecule or first candidate for the products we are developing? First, because of our results with ayahuasca, very promising results with ayahuasca, showing a very rapid antidepressant effect of ayahuasca happening already 1 day after the session, 1 day after the intervention. Second, because it's fast-acting. Depending on the routes of administration, as I've mentioned, if you have an inhaled route of administration, we are talking about 15 minutes most. And if we are talking intramuscular, we have 1 hour effects. The third reason, as Alejandro mentioned, is that DMT is endogenous. So why does it matter? Well, it matters because we have DMT circulating in our blood system right now, which means that our system, our biological system, is used to deal with this substance. We already have all the machinery in our bodies that it's capable of dealing with the substance. And in fact, you see that for the inhaled routes of administration, we are talking about a clearance in the order of 1 hour. So after 1 hour, your body is almost free of this increased amount of DMT that you provided. This is the clinical trial we have ongoing. So to test our two initial product candidates, we are also going to be targeting treatment-resistant depression. As I've mentioned, we have just started the phase 1 clinical trial early April. In about 2 to 3 months, we expect to start recruiting the patients for treatment-resistant depression for the inhaled version of DMT, the inhaled product. And in about 3 months, we expect to begin our phase 1 trial with the intramuscular formulation. And then in about 5 months, we expect to begin our intramuscular testing as a phase 2A in patients with treatment-resistant depression. This is an ascending dose study, which means that we are going to be testing different doses of NN-DMT. It will test safety, tolerability, and effects. We are also aiming at brain effects, besides other effects, behavioral effects, and so on, and the pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics, since we are collecting blood from all these individuals to understand not the dose response curve, but to understand the concentration response curve. In other words, we'll try to understand what is the most effective dose of NN-DMT. This is our facility. So this is the facility we have in the hospital. This is, well, it's plain here, but it's not there. Anyways, so it's a boho-style facility with rooms for therapists, with rooms for the psychiatry team, a very interesting room, a place within a university hospital with 340 inpatients bed, just so that you have an idea of how large the hospital is. And this is where our clinical facilities is currently based at. This is the future of BioMind. Then the past, so I tackle a little bit on the past of BioMind, the present of what we're doing, and the future. And the future comes from our past and our present. So in other words, we are very solid in the science that we do. This is a graph that shows you 36 different blood markers from our ayahuasca study. What I'm showing here is that it's trying to understand where the effects came from. So we did see an antidepressant effect of ayahuasca. Where did it come from? So in part, what this graph shows is that it came from biomarkers that are related to mental disorder, inflammation, chronic pain, and neuroplasticity. In other words, for instance, we did find that the patients that had the most benefit out of ayahuasca were the patients who had a profound impact on the inflammatory system. So that drives our future. This is our clinical pipeline. The clinical pipeline is based on different molecules. So we started our clinical pipeline with DMT, with the 2 formulations of DMT that I've just described. We have already in place a new product for 5-MeO DMT, an oral formulation of 5-MeO DMT, which is being tested right now as we speak. And we also started our preclinical trials with mescaline, with a formulation of mescaline. So in this slide, you can see the broader perspective that we have at BioMind, which is tackling different conditions, different molecules, and different routes of administration in order to understand what is the impact that these substances and these products have on all these conditions using these different routes of administrations and dosing schemes. So the last thing I want to mention is we do have a program that have begun earlier this year, which is to understand the impact of an intermediate dose of these substances. So for instance, the program in mescaline will tackle inflammation, and the idea here is to use a low dose of mescaline instead of going all the way to the psychedelic experience. And we know that in the psychedelic space, that's very important. So with that, I'd like to thank you and conclude by saying that, the reason why I'm here right now is because I truly believe in the power that these substances have, because I've seen it with my own eyes. We had over 150 patients going through our labs in the past 15 years. And we do see that these substances have a profound impact on these patients. Are psychedelics for everyone? From our experience, it's clear that it's not for everyone. It's not a silver bullet. It's not something that it's going to treat every condition. It's going to treat everyone. It's just like a roller coaster ride is not, and it should not be for everyone. This is how we understand psychedelics. They're not for everyone, but they're for a lot of people that today doesn't have any hope. And with this, we have the possibility to change this perspective of these people that are willing and that can ride this roller coaster. Thank you.
Fantastic presentation. BioMind Labs, we have Alejandro and Draulio. Any questions very quickly? Time for one at least. Yes, sir, right here.
We are doing it in Brazil, but we are migrating to the United States very soon.
What's your plan for going to the next how much?
I'd say this year, it all depends on the approach that we are going to be having with FDA in a couple of months. So we expect to have been coming to the US in the next few months. The other thing that's important to say is that we are currently moving to UK.
Yes.
Yep.
We are relocating our headquarters at the Cambridge Biomedical Campus in UK. So I believe in probably a few months, UK will become the center of psychedelics. And from there, it will be very easy for us working together with FDA. We already engaged someone from FDA that used to work for the last 30 years. So we have the right expertise in order to navigate FDA waters. But things to bear in mind, and because diversification, I believe, is everything in the psychedelic industry. So we need to be very sure that in our case, we have 3 different molecules in our portfolio. We target 7 different mental health disorders. And we have in our pipeline 5 different routes of administration, meaning that something could fail, but it's it's very difficult that all these lines failed. So there is where we believe that we have a very, very advantages compared with our peers. And something that Draulio mentioned, there is no doubt that big pharma companies along these last decades, with the psychiatry community and with the SSRIs, have failed. And this is something that we need to understand and to say without any fear. Traditional pharma companies have failed dealing with mental health conditions. And here we have the opportunity to bring novel drugs that will change the lives of patients that are suffering from different mental health disorders. So this is what we are doing. As Draulio mentioned, we have a past. We started 2 years ago, but science started in 2006. We are dealing with a substance that our bodies are used to, and we are 100% sure that finally we are going to achieve our milestone, which is in the different milestone that we have. Our main goal is to give a second chance to millions of patients.
Awesome. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Fantastic
you.
presentation. Thank you for the question, sir. Really appreciate it.